So the anniversary of January 6th recently came up, and obviously I began thinking about how conservatives masterfully lied and rewrote the entirety of the history of what they did that day. And it got me thinking about the absolute bull they spread about the Civil War to cover up the fact that they were the ones who started it in the first place and have now created an environment in where people think that they were the party that freed the slaves. Not on my watch. Not in 2025. This is the last year that this lie stands. It absolutely blows my mind that in the 21st century, pets of Caucasians like Candace Owens, otherwise known as POC, are still successful in brainwashing Americans into believing that the Republican Party today, which is currently preoccupied with calling Indians on Twitter, are the same people who freed the slaves back in the 1800s. But please, I mean, isn't it suspicious that the same people who claim to be the party of Lincoln and the party who freed the slaves coincidentally ride the same people who claim that the natural role of the Negro is servitude and literally blew up and shot and killed their own white brethren just to own black people for all time?
You don't find that suspicious?
Like, if these niggas had it their way, we would have never gotten graduation from Kanye. That's the level of evil we're dealing with here, just so you know. I mean, these are the same niggas on Twitter claiming that the Holocaust was just Hitler having a bad week. None too serious. Just a little dab of genocide, some calm, some little calm, little genocide, not too serious. Like, what in the hell? Like, these are the same people who want you to believe they were the party that was so progressive that they wanted to free the slaves. Stop playing. Because they knew they fucked up after killing 500,000 Americans, the most Americans killed in any war in our history, instead of owning up to what they did, conservatives do what they do best, which is lie their ass off to explain away their up.
Frankly, we did win this election.
You ever wondered why Republicans always kick and scream at the thought of the federal government having oversight over the nation's education? Well, after they blew up the entire country over owning slaves, organizations like the Daughters of the Confederacy and Sons of Confederate Veterans worked their asses off to make sure Southerners learned a bullshit version of Civil War history to escape the shame of what they'd done. Not even a full year after the war ended, conservatives were already rewriting their fuck up. Sound familiar? Does that sound familiar? With authors like Edward A. Pollard writing, "We won't talk about the moral question of slavery, but we should cast doubt on whether the term slavery, which is invoked by Northern writers, evoking judgment and sympathy from the world, is properly applied to the system of servitude in the South, which was really the mildest in the world, which didn't rest on acts of debasement and disenfranchisement, but elevated the African and was in the best interest of human improvement." Sound familiar? That's because it is. It is familiar. Conservatives are bold as when they have the upper hand. They are bold as fuck, but when evil is defeated, per usual, they start watt-padding their way out of their fuck-ups and trying to deny shit like the Holocaust, or deny stuff that happened on camera like January 6th, claiming it was a guided tour, calling the Civil War the War of Northern Aggression. I mean, conservatives are like 0-3 for insane historical acts. 0-3. I mean, like, y'all constantly do evil things and lose and fail every time. Instead of rewriting your fuck-ups, just stand before God and ask for forgiveness. Be humble. Accept defeat. Instead, what they always do is rewrite the story. Now, what did the actual Confederates believe their war was about? Why were they fighting? Well, let's dig the traitors up and ask them. South Carolina declared in their articles of secession that an increasing hostility on the part of non-slaveholding states to the institution of slavery, insisting that northern states had breached their constitutional obligation to enforce federal laws like the Fugitive Slave Act and had united in the election of a man to the high office of President of the United States, who would inaugurate a new policy hostile to the South and destructive of its beliefs and safety. It gets worse. The Vice President of the Confederacy, Alexander H. Stephens, claims this, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. I mean, the starting five for the Confederacy automatically includes Nathan Bedford Forrest, one of the founding members of the Ku Klux Klan, and conservatives were literally ready to crash out if we didn't honor and protect his statue. When black people and white Southerners had the audacity to even lock arms and try to advocate for civil rights, like, I don't know, the imprisonment, beatings, and lynchings weren't a clear enough message to them, conservatives literally erected more Confederate statues and flew more Confederate flags as a threat to any American, black or white, who believed in equality. To this day, we're still trying to get those flags and statues taken down because the party that freed the slaves is just adamant about keeping them up for some reason. Isn't it weird that the party of Lincoln desperately defends these symbols to the death? Thankfully, if we open up a book, something conservatives have not unlocked yet in the Purgatory, we discover that after the Civil Rights Act passed, Southern Dixiecrats became disenchanted with the Democratic Party. Lee Atwater, the campaign consultant who worked in Ronald Reagan's White House and arguably South Carolina's most effective Republican campaign operative, spoke very clearly about how the Republican Party had to use coded language to signal and appeal to Southern voters who were angry about civil rights in the South and were looking for a replacement to the Democratic Party.
I would approach that issue as a statistician or a political scientist, or no, as a psychologist, which I'm not. Is how abstract you handle the race thing. In other words, you start out, and now y'all aren't quoting me on this. All right, I won't do it. You start out in 1954 by saying, by 1968 you can't say that hurts your backfire, so you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now, you're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. And subconsciously, maybe that is part of it.
Now, some of you who are familiar with what I'm talking about know this to be the Southern strategy. It's a term attributed to Nixon's political strategist Kevin Phillips in an interview included in a 1970 New York Times article. Phillips stated his analysis based on studies of ethnic voting. From now on, the Republicans are never going to get more than 10 to 20% of the Negro vote, and they don't need any more than that. But Republicans would be short-sighted if they weakened enforcement of the Voting Rights Act. The more Negroes who register as Democrats in the South, the sooner the Negrophobe whites will quit the Democrats and become Republicans. That's where the votes are. Without that prodding from the blacks, the whites will backslide into their old, comfortable arrangement with the local Democrats. Basically saying that Republicans shouldn't get in the way of black people's right to vote, because if blacks are allowed to vote and enough of them begin to vote Democrat because of the Civil Rights Act, guess what? Because the more blacks who vote Democrat as a result of the Civil Rights Act, the more white racist conservatives will fall back from the Democratic Party and turn toward the Republican Party as an alternative, a party that will stand against this by talking about states' rights and things of that nature that we just heard in an interview by Lee Atwater. This is all tied together. Now, where have we also heard the term states' rights from? Which organization, very popular, well-known organization in American history, we see their flag all over the South all the time. Right now, which duplicitous, treacherous, enslaving, lying, backstabbing organization used the term states' rights? Oh yeah, the Confederacy. It's all linear with these people. And if we fast forward to today's era, the same party that screams up and down about being the party of Lincoln and the party that freed the slaves, when's the last time you've ever heard a Republican speak positively about John Brown? Honest question. The crazy white man who was willing to wage a war to free slaves? That guy? Well, they call him crazy. George Washington and his boys who waged a war over no taxation without representation. Those guys, they're heroes, they're legends, we love them. Oh my God. John Brown, though, he's a terrorist. He went too far because actually fighting for literal freedom is a little bit too crazy. That's a little bit too crazy to conservatives. You've never seen a conservative or Republican in your life ever honor or respect John Brown in life. When's the last time you've ever even heard them speak positively about Abraham Lincoln if it's not to score a little bullshit layup about slavery and freeing the slaves? When's the last time you've seen them speak positively about him? The reality is that Republicans don't support none of that shit, okay? The reality is Republicans aren't the party that freed the slaves. The Republican Party today are the ideological descendants of the Confederacy. We all saw it in real time when Trump was president. Remember when they tried to remove that Robert E. Lee statue and conservatives ran up and down the street with tiki torches screaming about, "You will not replace us"? Why is it that the party who seems to be the most proud of slaves being freed is also the party with the strongest emotional attachment to those who fought for the right to keep those slaves in chains forever? That's really, really weird. It's really, really odd. It's not so odd when you realize and understand exactly what I'm trying to tell you. Conservatives have always been conservatives. No matter what title they have right in front of their ideology, whether it's Democrat or Republican, conservatives have always been conservatives. They're always trying to hold on to some ridiculously backwards way of life or embracing some insane, deranged, evil, ethnicist, racist ideology meant to fuck over racist or ethnic groups of people they don't like. This is who conservatives have always been. They have always been that. This is the reason why Prager University released a video about how great it was that Robert E. Lee squashed the slave rebellion and had to delete the video. Because conservatives forgot that they keep walking around with freedom shirts by Under Armour all the time, but for some reason have a problem with a white man fighting for the freedom of blacks by using guns. When George Washington and his homeboys do it, it's heroic, it's amazing, and I agree, it was heroic. I'm not a hater, okay? I'm not a hater. I'm just saying it's kind of crazy that conservatives draw the line at slavery. Like, okay, come on, guys. I know the whole whipping and not being able to read and write and the mutilation and the assaults and all of that is really bad. But is violence really the answer? That is how conservatives view people fighting for their black people, fighting for their right to be free from slavery with white help. It's a little bit too far there, John Brown. A little bit too much dip on your chip there, John Brown. That's how conservatives view this stuff. It's always been the way they viewed it. They have to run around and hide behind terms like Democrat and Republican because they know in their heart of hearts who they actually are. This is the reason why Vivek Ramaswamy and Patrick Bet-David, after lecturing black Americans about real American history and American racial history, now find themselves being screamed at by white nationalists to go home. Vivek Ramaswamy sitting there, I didn't realize how many people really felt that way about me, that, my religion and my race were a problem. Are you dumb? Well, you thought we knew less than you about America? We, who have been here for forever, and you who just got here? That's not racist, it's just the truth. There does seem to be a trend of some people thinking they could lecture black folk in America about how race relations work, and then finding out the hard way that they don't work the way that they thought. PBD finding out that some conservatives want him to go home over the H-1B situation. Sir, you are brown. There are only so many points you have. There's only so much room you have to speak your mind. There will come a point where these same conservatives will tell you to shut your mouth. We tried to tell you. The Republican Party is not the party that freed the slaves, because it's not about parties, it's about ideologies. Today, as a black man, I'm well aware of the fact that the Democratic Party was the party of Robert E. Lee and Nathan Bedford Forrest and the rest. But frankly, in the 21st century, I don't want to be associated with the political party that honors and admires people who thought that it was their right to own me indefinitely. Sorry, not sorry. I don't want to be associated with a political party that honors and respects those people, traitors and slavers, people who would murder their own kind to enslave another race of people. Disgusting. Absolutely just disgusting. Horrible. Genuinely evil group of people. And if you read what they thought about black people, whether it was the Articles of Secession or the Cornerstone speech, these people were truly deranged. Truly. Why would I, as a black man in 2025, want to be associated with a political party who honors and respects and loves and venerates those people? Why would I want to be aligned with a political party who seeks to uphold and maintain flags and statues erected to intimidate my predecessors and those who try to aid them in their fight for freedom and equality? Why would I want to be associated with that? Like, regardless of what the names of the parties were back then and what they are today, if you choose to align yourself with that, if you choose to honor that, I don't want anything to do with you. When there was a vote to be cast to decide whether to keep Confederate statues in the Capitol or not, Republicans voted to keep them. To keep traitors whose only grandiose act was killing other white people to own blacks for eternity. It is disgusting. It is disgusting. It is filth. I don't want anything to do with it. I don't align with that. I don't want anything to do with that. And frankly, it highlights exactly what kind of tactics conservatives are forced to use. They have to lie. They have to rewrite historical events. They have to deny that certain things happened when we know they did in order to make their insanely racist, sexist, all sorts of phobic beliefs possible. Once again, they have to make it seem like, well, we didn't really do it right the first time, or we didn't even really do that at all, or it really wasn't that bad. They're just exaggerating it. They have to do these things to sell their ideology as appealing to the new generation of people. Because contrary to what some radical far leftists believe, white people aren't born racist. This is why white nationalist organizations have to create fan fiction events like The Great Replacement, or they have to rewrite historical events like the Holocaust or slavery to sell their insane, hateful beliefs to the next generation. This is the reality of what these people do in order to bring the next generation of young people of all races into their ridiculous ideology. They have to rewrite these historical events in order to reel them in. And that is what they do because they cannot thrive without lies. It's impossible for them to do.